Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I have not forgotten about you. I would never do that. But it's been a bit crazy here. If you're not in Virginia, then maybe you missed out on what's now been 3 weeks of wild snow on the ground here in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'm sure I did it to myself because I kept saying, really could use a weather break to catch up on some business related things that I need to work on. I did not mean one like this, not with a bunch of snow on the ground. So, I'm sorry about that. I will take the blame. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horse and Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. What I've been working on is my online course, Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. I am going to have a series of episodes on the podcast that directly relate to the modules, or what I call the 7 seeds of partnership in the course. What I want is for you to hear from some professionals who work in those fields or maybe more specific in the fields, and you can really understand why these are really important things that we should know about our horses that we are generally not taught in riding lessons. I'm going to get this series started with Ellen Peebles, who has been into horses at least as long as I have because we met when we were little girls riding together. And we're going to talk about those 7 things you don't learn in riding lessons and how she has seen that affect horses and riders and even herself over the years. Today, I have my old friend Ellen Peebles joining me on the podcast. Ellen and I grew up riding hunters together as little girls, and then, like a lot of us, we each took off and found our own paths in the horse world and life. And I'm really excited to have Ellen here to talk today about the things she learned along the way and the things that no one ever teaches us in riding lessons. So, welcome, Ellen. Can you tell everyone a little about your journey with horses?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you again, Anna. It's been too many decades. We've known each other pretty much on and off most of our lives. I think maybe I met you at Chris's and we were about 13 or so. I have a lot of memories of the lessons that we were in at Breckenridge. It's great to reconnect with you. I'm super excited to have this opportunity to kind of chime in and give a little bit of perspective in terms of what I've seen, what I think needs to change, where I think we all need improvement, what things I think that are overlooked. But I've been around horses since I was a child. My parents' house back in Chesapeake, Virginia. And at the time, there was a parcel of land behind my parents' house. And it was zoned ag, but that was grandfathered in. So while the rest of the neighborhood changed and developed, this one particular piece of property had a big red wooden barn on it. And that was our playground as kids. And I mean, I remember my mom had pictures of me, like there was a chain link fence in our backyard with a couple of strands of barbed wire and wooden posts. I could climb the chain link fence and go jump on bareback or just go play in the hay. There was trails behind there. It was set back like on a little creek. That's where we hung out. That's what's missing. I think it's a huge piece of what's missing in how children are raised today, is to kind of have that outdoor outlet where your parents just trust that you're going to go out there and not get killed. and you can be a kid, and you can figure yourself out and figure out, this is where I feel like I'm connected, and that's really kind of where I began to develop this curiosity and wanting to learn. I think most people that work with animals have this level of empathic awareness that even as a young child, it's something you so deeply identify with. I told my parents, "Hey, I want to learn how to ride horses," and I didn't. My parents didn't think that I was being that serious at the time, and but I
Mm.
was,
And
and
your parents were like mine, and they were not horse people.
not at all.
So,
And that really raises a great topic. It's like, how do parents who don't know anything about horses at all pick the right facility and the right trainer to coach their kid?
and I think what a steep learning curve for my parents. You know, of course, the first seed is awareness, and that's also the first module of my online course. And it's like they didn't even know what to be aware of at the time,
No,
which I
no.
think is still
Mm-mm.
true today for so many people who already ride, right? I mean, people get up to really high levels of riding without, I think, truly being aware of what really makes horses tick. And I don't even know that we totally know the answers to those questions yet, but they're not even aware that they need to be asking the question. And I know that you spent time international level grooming and riding horses. So when do you think it clicked for you that noticing these little things about horses actually mattered and that maybe the people that you were working for or with weren't noticing them?
That is a really, really good question. And I think that in order to give it a really thoughtful, intelligent answer, it would be to be absolutely brutally honest with myself and say that I didn't even come to this level of awareness and to kind of begin to evolve with the philosophy that you and I are discussing right now until maybe a couple years ago. It's
Yeah.
like an awakening. It really is. It's an awakening. It's a complete suspension of your ego and thinking that everything that you've ever been taught and as much as you know, is it even really correct? How do you remedy that? Where do
Right.
you go to get the correct information and knowledge? So for me, it was like for many, many years, it was like, okay, I've done this. I've won a state division. I was an exercise rider internationally in England for a year. I had such an ego because I thought of what I had accomplished and what I had been taught that I could just fake it to make it. You have like all of this interference with opinions and thoughts and methodologies and ideologies, and who's really right? And I began asking all of these questions of myself, once I began to work with some of the top people. I don't even know if you want to call them the top people, because a lot of times they have, it's all about the financial resources and the sponsorships and the corporate side of things that even propels them and gets them to where they're at.
Right.
So it makes you rethink the whole game. And I started waking up, I guess, when you and I really start to connect on social media a lot a couple of years ago. I was like, damn, Anna's starting to ask some really good questions. And there's a lot of merit to what she's asking. And I'm going to sit back. And now that I'm not engaged in this, I'm going to start reading and researching because I still care and because I still want to be involved. It's just that I don't want to be a servant of someone that may not even be doing any of this correctly to begin with.
Do you think that being in and out of the business for a while gave you a different perspective than just being fully immersed in it?
Yeah, because I think that a lot of these grooms and even riders, kids, trainers, owners, it's almost becomes cultish. Why is this so? Why is this becoming so prevalent in this sport, where if you don't go have a lesson with this person, or if this person's not your trainer, or if you don't have a horse with these bloodlines, or if you don't do this circuit, that you're not considered educated or credible or a professional. And so when I've had these breaks and I've been looking for the answers elsewhere, outside of listening to the person that I'm working for as a servant, and taking what they have to say as like the authority, they're the authority. No, I think that it's accelerated my growth having these breaks, because I'm studying and I'm reading and I'm asking the questions that everybody else is just accepting other answers, and
Hmm.
thinking that these answers are the holy grail of thought and intellect. And when there's another school of thought out there altogether, and that's what we're talking about, is this school of thought and its application, and how if you strip all of these other layers back and suspend your ego and what you think you know, there's a whole entire world of information out there available to you, that it's energy work. I mean, that's a little cliche, but it really is. It's not about the ride anymore. It's not about the perfect distance or the perfect lead change or the perfect cadence anymore. It's about it's about your intention and your energy, because what we're doing is we're co-opting into a central nervous system conversation. And you teach that all day long, and but not many other people do.
When did you think you started to feel that you needed to show up a certain way emotionally and physically for the horses rather than just being firm or correct? When did you realize that the energy shift was more important than what you're always taught to do?
You know how you are when you're in your early 20s, like you're just so hungry for an opportunity. There was something in me that knew that in order to become a catch rider, which was my goal at the time, that I had to show up differently than everybody else. And I had to do things a little bit differently to have a competitive edge. And I'm a super competitive person, just like you are. I knew that if I wanted to get to where I wanted to go and really pursue it and become extra good, that I had to show up differently. I had to learn differently. I had to have a heightened sense of awareness.
I find one of the hardest things to get through to people who are very competitive and who want to make progress, win, do all those things. The third module in my course, relational consistency, and how that consistency with horses doesn't always mean the work that you put in. A lot of people assume that
Routine.
consistency, right, is about their routine
Yeah, your time
and
management.
right, and how,
Yeah,
how often they're worked, how
yeah,
regularly, how effective the work is. And really, for horses, they want a connection. They want a human to feel connected with. And I often use the comparison of horses off the track. So I've worked with a lot of off the track thoroughbreds.
yeah,
And generally, off the track horses have a really good relationship with their riders. So they are not usually difficult to ride and learn to retrain in the riding realm. But everybody will always say, oh my God, but their ground manners are terrible. They're hard to work with on the ground. Well, that's because typically the grooms are just there to get things done. And they're not there to be a part of the horse's existence. Whereas the jockey, even the exercise jockey, especially the exercise jockey, because they do it every day, they know that they have to be part of this horse's existence for the horse to be like, yeah, I can run with you and not want to kill you and get you off. So, as someone who's been a groom and an exercise rider, and often the most consistent human in a horse's day, did
Yeah.
you notice a difference in the horses depending on who handled them? And when did you realize that the relationship consistency mattered more than how often they were worked?
Well, that takes me back the early 2000s when I had the opportunity to work abroad, and I went over to the UK, and I was in a relationship at the time, and he was like, "Well, if you're going to come over here, you have to work." And I said, "Well, I can ride." you know, and there's no shortage of people with horses in England. So I started kind of getting immersed into that exercise rider world because that was the only work that I could find under the table without having to have a professional work visa. So I went that route and I wound up getting hired by the pretty famous point to point trainer family. And their entire philosophy in terms of how they began to interact with their horses, even down to how they manage their feed, their grain, and their forage, they grew all of their own shit. They grew their own grain, they grew their own hay. It was amazing. They grew their own herbs to add to their food. It changed my whole thought process. It was like these people are caring for and taking care of and asking questions of these animals in a way that I've never seen before. I've never seen this be done before. It's a completely different philosophy and mindset than anything you see in the United States. And you've been to Europe, so you know this is true. Everything they do is so much different. Somebody that's so highly respected that everybody in that world knows who this person is, and seeing how the whole dialogue is so much softer and the care is so much softer and the empathy is there and all of these other things that are there, even down to the way they ride these horses out in the morning. And it was an experience that I'm super grateful for, even to this day, because it really opened a lot of things that I thought I knew that I didn't know shit about with.
So can you remember a moment when a horse clearly answered you, even if it was not the answer that you wanted, but you realized they were giving you real information? And why
Yeah.
do you think that riding lessons don't teach people how to wait for those answers or even to listen for them?
Okay, so this is the memory that really kind of stood out the most. This was for the adult amateur division. I had qualified to get there with this one horse, ridden him the whole year. And we came down to like the last two classes to win the whole division for the year, right? He was a big bay thoroughbred, built like a warm blood, head, and I go on course, and my heart is pounding. And this horse, he's been known to stop before. And I'm like, okay, I've been sitting here almost 3 hours waiting to be on deck. This class is huge and I'm going to win it. And so I went into the warm up area, like where it was quiet, where nobody else was. And I got myself just centered and I started doing breath work. And I remember just feeling that horse's breath and getting so centered that everything else just kind of faded out, like the sounds, my thoughts. It was like it was a meditative state, is what it was. And I didn't even know it was that at the time. And I sat there and I closed my eyes and I visualized my ride. I visualized every step of that ride on that course. So I come back, I go in the ring, right? And my heart, my adrenaline is just kicking. I get on course, and what happens? The first jump, he stops. He stops in front of a lot of people. This was in a stadium. I was like, okay, now what? I just ruined the first class to three class division because he's not used to me being in this state of like this surge state of just, nerves and then adrenaline and then the endorphins, like all of that. He was responding to all of that. And that's why he stopped. That adrenaline state shut him down. And I said, you know what? No matter what happens, I'm gonna go back in and I'm going to stay calm for this animal. I'm just going to get to this place in my mind where I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my best. But my goal is to control my breath and my body and my heart rate. And I did that. I won the class. And nobody teaches this because it's not taught to them. The reason why we're having this discussion now is because we've been open enough and honest enough to realize we didn't know it all and that we didn't have all the answers. We're willing to ask these questions and try different things and have more of this like lab type of experience to see, okay, where's the best fit? What makes the most sense? What kind of response am I getting? And what's best for the horse? You know?
Right. And that's the most important thing, right?
And there's so much more to learn and to explore and so many different areas to grow. You just need to surround yourself and get around like-minded people that can challenge you in a positive way, like Anna has done with me. She's challenged me, she's opened my mind, she's made me think of things that, maybe I was a little more rigid years ago, not things I would have never considered years ago. But I think the reason why I've had longevity in all of this is because I haven't been afraid to adapt. And I've always kind of had the mindset where I consider myself to be a student for life.
So as a professional groom, so when do you think that you noticed that horses will offer more things in a lighthearted or playful environment than when there's a lot of pressure and a lot of focus, which your story was perfect for that, right? Because maybe that was the moment that you realized that, oh shit, if I am really focused, I'm a mess.
Yeah,
I have a strong intent here to be the top competitor of the day, and my horse is like, not today.
I mean, I've seen it at different places that I've worked. I don't think you're going to see it at any of the super highly competitive, high pressure show atmospheres because there's no outlet for them to express that, right? I mean, they're boxed up pretty much 24 hours a day. The only time they get out is if they go out into a little closet of a paddock, or unless they're hand walked or lunged into the ground. It sickens me that they're expected to be so robotic and just machines and slaves of whatever their owners are trying to accomplish.
I think they're completely dysregulated. And I think they're overwhelmed. It's just obvious. And I'll give you an example. When I was at WEF, I was thinking I'm going to develop. There's going to be a lot that I'm going to be learning. I'm excited. This is my big break. This is my dream come true. So I get there. Wellington is extremely congested. Just getting from the barn to the ring takes an act of God. It's just overstimulating. It's like being in a casino, but it's a horse show. And I don't think it's conducive to like anything that could even be remotely healthy for these animals.
Or for the
Anyway,
humans usually.
I mean, half the people there are, like no one's happy, no one's
Right.
smiling, no one's in a good mood. Everybody's walking around with a scowl on their faces. And I'm just looking around and I'm thinking to myself, this was my dream. This was
Yeah.
my dream. Like, no, this is a nightmare. And I figured that out really quick. So, and it's sad. It was really sad. I remember this one mare, her name was Amy. I'll never forget it. Big, beautiful, warm blood bay mare. And she had an abscess, right? And you could just see the pain in this horse's face. And I remember standing in front of her stall when I was doing waters one morning, and the way she looked at me, like it makes me emotional right now just to recall that memory. But Anna, it was like these horses are so unhappy and they're so shut down and they're just in a state of survival right now. And just seeing all of that, it just really opened my eyes to how some of these shows and some of these trainers and owners they're worshipped and they're idolized. But when you really get to see firsthand the conditions and the pressure and what the demands that they're placing on these animals, my
Right.
dream had just tanked. I couldn't do it. I refused to do it. So
Mhm.
I call up Tad Coffin and I'm explaining to him, like what had happened, and just that I was devastated, and that I wanted to shift gears and be in more of a position where I could learn from someone that completely written off the competitive world, and that is more invested in the well-being of their animals, create a state of calm and regulation and playfulness and willingness, and being able to ask those questions and having the horse answer them and willingly do so without coercion. If you look at Tad's website, Tad Coffin Performance Saddles, he has all kinds of articles where you can research the science behind. But Tad's approach, and so when I made that shift from the competitive world to actually being an observer, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And every single one of these horses, once they were grounded out and in his state of play, they all started relaxing. They started sighing. They started chewing. They started licking. And that to me was like this. And this is such a departure from everything that I just saw, and the commotion and the crazy. I'm sure he's got plenty of stuff up on YouTube that people can go and watch what I'm talking about. But I think it just really depends on, you know, what somebody's end goal is with all of this. You know, how do you want to engage with your animals, and what is your goal, and what is your level of expectation? What do you want the end result to be?
Yeah, that brings me to another question, because it was interesting that you mentioned that he had basically left the show world behind. I was just watching something else on the internet, and people were talking about how a lot of times we think that the best horsemen are the people that we see on TV, or, doing the big things at horse shows. And that's not necessarily the truth.
No,
And
it's not.
there's so many of these great horse people that have left the competition world totally behind because of what you just talked about. For one, I think that you can do it. I have done it in a healthy way with horses, and we've had fun, but you have to
Sure.
be a very independent thinker. You
And
cannot,
your level of awareness has to be much more developed
yeah, and you
than
can't be
the
worried
average.
about being like everybody else.
I think that people are too caught up in projecting an image. And that's why I always kind of have fallen back to the masters, and the more classical horsemen, because what is horsemanship today? Does it
Yeah,
even exist? Is it even still alive today?
right, right.
And when I began to ask these questions, I was just kind of like, I don't think you're going to find it at these big venues. But when you really think about it, these animals are nothing more than a tool to the means to the ends for somebody.
It's so much pressure to make the money and to be able to keep going at whatever pace you're at, that the pressure is what, for the human then overrides everything else. They're like, we just have to get it done. And there's no thought as to what that does to the horse. And if it makes that horse crazy, or that horse gets sick or lame or whatever, they just chuck it
They're
off.
replaced.
And I also
Yeah.
think that we, especially in that high intensity competition world, often overlook those little simple things. And I say it's a simple thing. It's not always a simple thing, but it's okay because I can ride it. Yeah, I can get
I'm
on
going to
it,
lunge it to death.
or
Yeah.
I'm going to do that,
Or I'm going
right?
to stick it.
Right. Rather than, oh, what's really causing the problem?
Yeah. Yeah. The
So,
root cause is the symptoms are always being treated, but the root cause isn't. And that's a whole nother can of worms.
yeah.
how
sure.
people approach medicine and healing and well-being. And it's the approach too in horsemanship, and especially at a high level at some of these venues where it's like, okay, we're going to treat the symptom, but we're not going to look at the root cause. And I'm grateful to you because, wanted to dig a little bit deeper, like than the average person. But until these conversations become more mainstream, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of the same until people start to figure out. I hope it does change and I hope that things do get better. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people like us that have just decided to say, hey, I don't want to do this and I'm not going to engage in an industry that's just so upside down in so many different ways. I want a genuine relationship with my animal and I want it to be reciprocal and I don't want to have to coerce or use pressure or force or manipulate.
We should all aspire to be like that.
I think the conversation is the first step because we only get one day at a time and we can only put our efforts and ourselves into practicing that one day at a time. But I
Right.
think study is the key. I think continuing to be a student of our animals is the key, and to not just accept what we're being shown or seen at face level, to always be inquisitive and curious and to ask questions.
I think for a lot of people, just trust your own intuition. If the approach feels good to you, if that feels valid and right, okay. But if you're wondering or you don't feel good about it or you're afraid,
It's
that
okay to
little
say no. It's
right, just
okay. Yeah,
say
it's
no.
okay to back out of it and say no. This feels off. I don't like this. I have more questions. I'm uncertain. Hesitation sometimes is the red flag that's needed to prevent something really negative from happening.
Yeah.
You know, an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure.
So true. Yep. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you. If anyone's curious about what I was talking about for grounding, the best resources for that would be tadcoffinperformancesaddles.com. He's got some great articles. He's also all over YouTube.
Doing really interesting stuff.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Your experiment for this week is take your horse out in the halter, the lead rope, and just allow them to wander, graze, smell things, whatever. Notice, do they do this confidently? Are they trying to pull you around? Or are they questioning, well, what do we do next? What is their reaction when you allow them the space to go check things out? And just notice that. That is your experiment. And if you're here in Virginia where we still have a bunch of snow on the ground and sometimes it's frozen and sometimes it's not, it's going to be an interesting experiment too, because you're going to see, does my horse have some autonomy? Can they figure out the landscape, the terrain, the footing? So until next time, have fun with your horses. I'm really looking forward to this series of podcast episodes. I hope you will stick with us and invite your friends because it's going to be a fun journey we're going on here for the next 8 weeks or so. Talk to you next time. Happy riding. All right, horse fiends, thanks for hanging out with us today. If this episode got your gears turning, don't forget to check out Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. The links are in the show notes. It's the program that'll take everything we talked about here and actually help you apply it in real life with your horse. And hey, before you ride off, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review of the show. It helps more riders like you find us and keep these conversations going. All the links you need are waiting in the show notes. Happy riding!